Welcome to Community Radio Networks on this first day of spring. It is the vernal equinox. And as we welcome this first full day of spring, Navroz Mubarak to all those that are celebrating Nowruz today. Community Radio Networks has all the information you need to take on this first day of spring today. It is the 20th of March. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Matgil. Hours after the Supreme Court cleared the way for the state to begin enforcing the measure, it was put on hold. Supreme Court's intervention with Texas law triggers confusing legal back and forth. And a federal appeals court late last night put Texas's controversial immigration law back on hold, hours after the Supreme Court had cleared the way for the state to begin enforcing that measure. The Supreme Court allowing Texas to enforce for now a contentious new law that gives local police the power to arrest migrants, but Texas plans to arrest those migrants suspected of entering the U.S. illegally were again on hold this morning after setting off uncertainty along the border, and anger from Mexico flared during a brief few hours that the law was allowed to take effect. Since the start of the Biden administration, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has mounted an increasingly brazen challenge to the federal government over immigration, questioning the notion long upheld by federal courts that it is Washington and not border states that sets immigration policy. He has been able to notch some important victories, pushing the boundaries of what a governor can do when it comes to immigration enforcement. Arkansas officials are sending National Guard troops to Texas to help with security along the southern border. And President Biden will be in Dallas later today for a fundraiser. He'll be in Dallas for a pair of private campaign receptions. One of Biden's Dallas events will be hosted by several prominent trial lawyers, according to an invitation obtained by the Dallas Morning News, and the other event will be hosted by Dallas businessman Neelan Youngblood. The president, looking to raise cash, his campaign currently has at least $155 million cash on hand. He will travel to Houston tomorrow. Both President Biden and former President Trump were in the state last month as they held dueling appearances at different points along the U.S.-Mexico border. And as this year's presumptive Democratic and Republican presidential nominees, they were sweeping yesterday's uncontested primaries in Florida, Ohio, Arizona, Illinois, and Kansas, adding hundreds of additional delegates to their respective tallies and continuing their unimpeded march to the summer conventions, where they will formally accept their party's nomination. Things went former President Trump's way yesterday in a pair of high-profile elections in Ohio that could determine Republicans' chances of picking up critical seats this fall and expanding their power in Washington. Bernie Moreno, a former car dealer and blockchain entrepreneur, has won Ohio's Republican Senate nomination. And his victory spares former President Trump's embarrassment in what became a brawl of a primary. He endorsed Moreno in December and headlined a rally for him last weekend, a sign that Moreno needed help across the finish line. Former President Trump told the Supreme Court he should be granted absolute immunity for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results that culminated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, saying a ruling against him would incapacitate every future president. Former President Trump has sued ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, alleging defamation over the anchor's questioning of Representative Nancy Mace about her endorsement of Trump. An ex-Trump White House advisor, Peter Navarro, reported to a federal prison in Miami yesterday afternoon to begin a 4-month sentence for refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expected to travel to Israel on Friday. His visit comes at a critical time as U.S. and Israeli officials are likely to discuss alternatives to a ground offensive of Gaza's southern city of Rafah next week. It is U.S. and Israel talks on Rafah to take place at the White House, and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will host Israeli Defense Minister next week for a bilateral meeting at the U.S. Defense Department. An agreement reached by U.S. congressional leaders in the White House on a massive bill funding military, State Department, and a range of of other government programs will continue a ban on U.S. funding for UNRWA, the main U.S. agency for Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spurned a plea from Joe Biden to call off the planned ground assault on Rafah, the last refuge in Gaza for more than 1 million displaced people, where Israel believes Hamas militants are holed up. Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated plans to launch an offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah less than 24 hours after President Biden warned against precisely such a move in a call with the Israeli leader. Israel's military has said it had killed around 90 gunmen and arrested 160 in a raid on Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Ceasefire talks between an Israeli delegation and mediators from Qatar, the U.S. and Egypt have entered their third day in Qatar's capital of Doha today. Canada is halting its arms shipment to Israel. And in this massive blow to Prime Minister Netanyahu, Canada deciding to stop all arms shipments to Israel. We have Open Arms director and founder Oscar Camps, who has said that he's determined to keep the deliveries going despite the significant danger to his team from the ongoing Israeli bombardment, and that's the Spanish charity Open Arms vowing more Gaza food aid. Israel launched missiles at several military targets outside the Syrian capital of Damascus in what regional intelligence and Syrian sources said were stepped-up strikes on fortifications of Hezbollah. The U.S. State Department says it's exploring options to evacuate American citizens trapped in Haiti, where a power vacuum has left violent gangs to seize control of most of the capital and sent more than 15,000 people fleeing from their homes. 10 U.S. nationals arrived in Florida yesterday aboard a private plane that was chartered by missionaries out of Haiti. And dozens of U.S. citizens have been evacuated on a State Department charter flight, and many others are waiting to be rescued as the Caribbean nation remains paralyzed by escalating gang violence and political instability that has left bustling streets vacant and necessities like food and gas scarce. Brazilian federal police have indicted former President Jair Bolsonaro of allegations he falsified his COVID-19 vaccination data in the country's public health database in December of 22 to falsely indicate that he, his daughter, and close associates had received the vaccine. He also faces charges of criminal association for allegedly conspiring with his aides to enter the false data. Ugandan security forces are on high alert after they said fighters from an Islamic State-linked group entered the country over the weekend. The Allied Democratic Forces militants planning attacks in urban areas, places of worship, schools, and public events. And South Africa's ruling African National Congress is taking the independent electoral body and a rival political party fronted by a former president to court, underscoring a fractious build-up to what could be the country's most pivotal election in 30 years. Senegal's president has told BBC he does not regret delaying his year's elections. He said he did not make the decision alone. He was responding to concerns raised by parliamentarians. After a violent backlash, many feared the relatively stable nation was slipping into political crisis, but the attempt to push the election back by 10 months was blocked by Senegal's top court. The 2024 World Happiness Report, which ranks countries based on self-reported happiness levels, has been released, and Finland was named the world's happiest country for the 7th consecutive year. We do have, for the first time since the World Happiness Report began over a decade ago, that the U.S. has fallen out of the top 20 happiest countries worldwide. Global temperatures smashed heat records last year as heat waves stalked oceans and glaciers suffered record ice loss. According to a UN warning, 2024, it is likely to be even hotter this year. The State of the Global Climate Report showing that records were once again broken and in some cases smashed for greenhouse gas levels, surface temperatures, ocean heat and acidification, sea level rise, Antarctic sea ice cover and glacier retreat. Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has announced his resignation in a very surprise move. Speaking to journalists outside government buildings in Dublin this morning, he said he would resign as soon as his successor could take up office. He first took office in 2017 after being elected leader of the Fine Gael party. He's the country's youngest Prime Minister and Ireland's first gay leader, and he is of Indian descent. Several prominent lawyers have published stinging academic critiques and legal opinions about the Vatican's recently concluded trial of the century, highlighting violations of basic defense rights and rule of law norms that they warn could have consequences for the Holy See going forward. The opinions cite Pope Francis's role in the trial, since he secretly changed Vatican law 4 times during the investigation to benefit prosecutors, and they call into question the independence and impartiality of the tribunal, since its judges swear obedience to Pope Francis, who can hire and fire them at will. Pope Francis has repeated his call for negotiations to end wars in Ukraine and Gaza after remarks about raising the white flag. At his weekly audience at the Vatican, the 87-year-old turned his thoughts to the populations of the martyred Ukraine and the Holy Land, Palestine, Israel, who suffer so much from the horrors of war. The European Union is pressing ahead with a plan to use the profits generated from billions of euros of Russian assets frozen in Europe to help provide weapons and other funds for Ukraine. Vladimir Putin took to the Red Square stage for an election celebration that seemed to carry a grander message for the flag-waving crowd of thousands and for the world. Having extended his rule over Russia, his focus would be tightening his grip on Ukrainian territory. Following his re-election, President Putin has announced the further strengthening of the military and security organizations. Russian and Belarusian athletes will not take part in the opening ceremony at the 2024 Olympics in Paris. Athletes from both countries banned following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. However, the athletes from Russia and Belarus who qualify for the Games can compete as neutrals. Moldova said it has expelled a Russian diplomat from Moscow after Moscow opened polling stations for its presidential election in Moldova's pro-Russia breakaway region of Transnistria. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin warned that Ukraine's survival was in danger and sought to convince allies that the U.S. was committed to Kyiv, even as Washington has essentially run out of money to continue arming Ukrainian forces. Ukraine's President Zelensky appealed to Kyiv's allies to supply more air defenses, saying Russia had launched 130 missiles, more than 320 attack drones, and almost 900 guided bombs in attacks this month alone. At a joint press conference in Berlin, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk reaffirmed their support for Ukraine. Germany's Air Force has ordered 75 U.S. cruise missiles at a cost of 8 billion euros in the latest effort to build up Berlin's defenses in the face of a potential Russian-NATO war. And President Putin will travel to China in May for talks with Xi Jinping in what could be the Kremlin chief's first overseas trip of his new presidential term. Hong Kong lawmakers unanimously passed a national security law yesterday, strengthening punishments for offenses tied to dissent and espionage. The law will expand the city's ability to crack down on activists and journalists, many jailed following the 2019 anti-government protests. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol called fake news and disinformation based on AI and digital technology threats to democracy, as some officials attending a global summit accused Russia and China of conducting malicious propaganda campaigns. He was speaking at the opening of the Summit for Democracy in Seoul. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the World News on community radio networks on this first day of spring. Military airstrikes in western Myanmar have killed at least 25 members of the country's Muslim Rohingya minority, including children, prompting the UN chief to express concerns over the escalating violence. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed deep concern over the deteriorating situation and escalation of conflict in Myanmar. Prime Minister Modi today spoke to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and congratulated him on his re-election as the president of the Russian Federation for a 5th term. The two leaders agreed to make concerted efforts towards further strengthening the special and privileged strategic partnership between the two countries in the years to come. The Election Commission of India announced the voting and result declaration schedules for the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and the polls will be held in 7 phases from the 19th of April to the 1st of June, covering a total of 543 constituencies. Today, the Delhi High Court will hear a plea by Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal challenging the repeated summons issued to him by the Enforcement Directorate in a case related to the now scrapped excise policy. And Maharashtra Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis has indicated that the recent meeting between Union Home Minister Amit Shah and MNS Chief Raj Thackeray has shown positive signs, adding that the outcome of their discussions is expected to become clearer in the coming days. German police detained 2 Afghan citizens accused of planning to attack police near the Swedish parliament in response to the burning of copies of the Quran. The suspects, identified only as Afghan citizens, were detained in the eastern city of Gera. And as the State Department in Washington reiterated that it did not want Afghanistan to be a safe haven for terrorism, experts based in the U.S. see very little chance of a full-blown conflict between the two neighbors following the strikes earlier this week. During a press briefing, Vedant Patel underlined that the U.S. doesn't want Afghanistan to become a safe haven for terrorism when it comes to counter-terrorism cooperation with Pakistan. The Foreign Office in Islamabad confirmed that Pakistan carried out intelligence-based anti-terrorist operations inside the border regions of Afghanistan hours after Kabul said airstrikes conducted on its soil had killed 8 people. Following recent skirmishes on the Pakistan-Afghan frontier, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif today asserted that the government would not tolerate any cross-border terrorism. Defense Minister Khwaja Asif has claimed that Afghan nationals living in Pakistan had managed to join the army, with one individual even reaching the rank of captain before they were dismissed. Ahead of his appearance at a congressional panel, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu submitted a written statement expressing Washington's concerns about irregularities in the February 8th elections, while also emphasizing the need to stay engaged with Pakistan to help it navigate through the crises that it is facing. He is the diplomat whose supposed warning to former Pakistan ambassador to the U.S. Asad Majid was the subject of a cipher sent by the envoy to Islamabad. And 12 miners have been killed and 8 rescued after an explosion in a coal mine in the Zardolo area of Balochistan's Harnai district. The cash-strapped federal government issued a travel advisory for the President, Prime Minister, Chief Justices, service chiefs and bureaucrats, among others, binding them to fly in certain classes to cut costs. The Cabinet Division said the President and the Chief Justice of Pakistan will travel in Class 1, whereas the Prime Minister, Senate Chairman, National Assembly Speaker, Ministers, Services Chiefs, MNAs, Federal Secretaries, Grade 22 officers and ambassadors will travel in business class. Pakistan's footballers are making an impassioned appeal to fans to attend the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifier against Jordan at the Jinnah Stadium tomorrow in Islamabad. And after Islamabad United won their 3rd HBL Pakistan Super League title in the early hours of yesterday, wrapping up the 9th edition of the country's T20 extravaganza, focus immediately shifts to the national side and the upcoming T20 World Cup. After being snatched away from several fans at the entry gates and in the stands, Palestinian flags were finally waved in the Pakistan Super League, and the symbol of protest against Israel's atrocities in Gaza was carried freely at Karachi's National Bank Stadium. And this gesture comes after several incidents in which fans were disallowed from taking Palestinian flags and banners with messages of solidarity with Gazans into the stadium. The Pakistan Cricket Board had remained silent over the issue. And contact between the Pakistan Olympic Association and the Ministry of Interprovincial Coordination over the organization of the South Asian Games was re-established as the two held a meeting at the Olympic House in Lahore, where it decided that Lahore would be the main hub for the regional sporting extravaganza. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that I have in the world news for you. We do have your financial news coming up next. Stay tuned right here on this first day of spring. It is the 20th of March today. And we are at our equinox today, our spring equinox, starting the season of spring. right, let's get you all the financial news that we have for you today. And we'll start with the foreign currency exchange rates. We have the Indian rupee at 83.21, Pakistani rupee at 278.38, Bangladeshi taka at 109.71, Sri Lankan rupee 304.09, the Nepalese rupee at 133.20, British pound 0.79, the euro at 0.92, the Canadian dollar 1.36, the Australian dollar 1.53, Mexican peso 16.84, Chinese yuan 7.20, Japanese yen 151.78, Russian ruble 91.74, the Thai baht at 36.20, and the Turkish lira at 32.39. Asian shares have closed mostly higher, while European markets opened lower today as investors awaited the latest signals from the Federal Reserve on the timing of cuts to interest rates. U.S. stock futures trod water in cautious trading this morning as investors waited to find out whether the Federal Reserve has shifted its view on how many interest rate cuts could come this year. S&P 500 futures little change on the heels of a fresh all-time closing high for the benchmark. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures hovered below the flat line, while those on the tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 tipped slightly higher. The Federal Reserve is set to announce an interest rate decision today, revealing its latest move in a years-long battle to dial back price increases. President Biden and the congressional leaders announced that they had reached a government funding deal, signaling the close of a months-long saga that featured numerous shutdown threats. With a tight window left to consider funding bills, it is possible that there will still be a brief government shutdown over the weekend. However, it will likely have little impact on services or federal workers unless it stretches into next week. Bitcoin fell by as much as 6.5% yesterday, on track for its largest one-day drop in 2 weeks as a wave of selling hit cryptocurrencies and other risk assets. The price was last down 5.86% at 63,419. In the last week, Bitcoin has fallen by nearly 9%, set for its largest week-on-week decline since last September. Oil prices edged lower today after hitting multi-month highs on the previous session, as investors brace for the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate policy announcement later in the day. Brent crude futures for May fell 62 cents or 0.71% to 86.76 a barrel, and West Texas Intermediate futures for April delivery, which expire on today's settlement, fell 71 cents or 0.85% to 82.76 a barrel. Microsoft has spun off a new organization, Microsoft AI, with Google DeepMind and Inflection AI co-founder Mustafa Suleyman joining as the CEO. The new AI division will focus on the development of Copilot and other consumer AI products. General Mills topped market expectations for third quarter sales and profit today, backed by higher prices for its breakfast cereals, snack bars, and pet food products that help cushion a blow from slowing demand. Shares of the packaged food maker rose about 3% in pre-market trading this morning after it reaffirmed its annual sales and profit targets for a third time this year. Kering SA shares plunged after the French luxury group warned that sales at Gucci, its biggest brand, have fallen about 20% in the first quarter. The stock dropped as much as 15% in Paris trading, its steepest intraday decline since 1992, wiping more than $7.6 billion from Kering's market value. The sales slump at Gucci, more dependent on China than some luxury peers, was owing to a steeper than expected drop in the Asia-Pacific region. The fashion group has been trying to revitalize Gucci, the Italian label that accounts for about two-thirds of profit, without any success. Controlled by billionaire Pinault family, Kering has struggled to keep up with rivals like LVMH, Moet, Hennessy, Louis Vuitton, and Hermes International, as luxury sales have cooled over the past year, especially in China. Boeing Company predicted a massive cash drain for the first quarter as regulatory scrutiny and slow output of its 737 MAX jetliner following a January mid-air accident take their toll on its finances. Super Microcomputer Inc. is guiding potential investors in a sale of 2 million shares to a price of $875 each. And Nordstrom stock has jumped more than 10% following a report that the retailer is considering going private. Billionaire philanthropist Mackenzie Scott has donated $640 million to 361 nonprofit groups. The ex-wife of Jeff Bezos and a co-founder of Amazon has been keeping good on her word to donate at least half of her wealth to charity as part of the Giving Pledge. The latest round of donations, which varied from gifts of $1 million to $2 million, were awarded to nonprofit groups across the country with a variety of focuses: the arts, affordable housing, education, public health, immigration, and diversity. Taylor Swift has set a new record with the premiere of her Eras Tour concert film on Disney+. It had 4.6 million views on Disney+ in its first 3 days of release, making it the #1 music film ever on the platform. Swifties watched 16.2 million hours of the blockbuster 3.5-hour concert film on Disney+ during this past weekend. Disney+ defines a viewer's total stream time divided by a runtime. College football playoff and ESPN have announced a $7.8 billion deal that will give the network exclusive rights to the expanded postseason through the 2031 season, with the national championship game moving to ABC starting in 2026. More than 70 businesses across the country shut their doors this week in a show of solidarity to call for federal paid family and medical leave. The day of action coincided with Women's History Month, highlighting the value of investing in women in the workforce. Patty Boyd was at the epicenter of the swinging 60s, but not always the center of attention. The model and photographer, who was often in the shadow of her rock icon husbands, George Harrison and Eric Clapton, comes into sharp focus through a trove of letters, photos, and other items that she's selling at Christie's auction house. The collection, which went on public display at Christie's London headquarters, provides a glimpse into the heart of the 60s and 70s counterculture. The 111 lots up for sale include affectionate letters from both Harrison and Clapton, alongside clothing, jewelry, drawings, and photographs, some of Boyd and some by her. If Boyd at 79 feels a pang at parting with them, she isn't saying it. And she is famous as a musician's muse, inspiration for the Beatles song Something, composed for her by Harrison, as well as for Clapton's scorching Layla and Sweet Wonderful Tonight. Freddie Mercury's sanctuary in London, where he lived the last decade of his life, is on sale for the first time in nearly half a century, minus his exquisite clutter. Garden Lodge, as the new Georgian brick home in the posh Kensington neighborhood is known, is for sale by Knight Frank for offers exceeding £30 million. It is $38 million, and it is not publicly listed. Mercury, the frontman for Queen, bought the house in 1980, the year the band's album The Game. With its hits, another one bites the dust, and Crazy Little Thing Called Love topped the charts. He reportedly paid cash for the property, which was listed for more than £500,000, according to Mercury, an intimate biography of Freddie. Across the country, some teenage boys have stopped washing their hair. And do we have to thank who for that? TikTok, of course. It's part of a no shampoo trend, trying to convince young men that you can retain your hair to not need a shampoo. Dermatologists, of course, saying this is nonsense. They say not washing your hair can lead to clogged follicles, and that is what leads to premature balding. Not to mention the fact that you will stink if you never wash your hair. Approximately 95% of non-organic strawberries, leafy greens such as spinach and kale, collard and mustard greens, grapes, peaches, and pears, tested by the U.S. government, contain detectable levels of pesticides. Nectarines, apples, bell and hot peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans rounded out the list of 12 most contaminated samples of produce, and it's dubbed the Dirty Dozen by the Environmental Working Group, and that these pesticides have been linked in studies to preterm births, congenital malformations such as neural tube defects, spontaneous abortions, and an increase in genetic damage in humans. Wendy's is celebrating the arrival of spring with a classic flavor combination. The Orange Dreamsicle Frosty, now available at all participating Wendy's locations, available along with the classic chocolate Frosty, and the Orange Frosty is replacing the vanilla. Bluebell has recently expanded into St. Louis and celebrated this new phase with a new flavor that Bluebell fans across the nation can enjoy. Inspired by a famous St. Louis treat called Gooey Butter Cake, is flavorful cake batter ice cream combined with a luscious cream cheese swirl and rich gooey butter cake pieces. That gooey butter cake available in the half-gallon and pint sizes for a limited time by Bluebell. The season that many consider to be the most beautiful time of the year in Texas is here, and that's wildflower season. Texas has more than 5,000 species of wildflowers, and though we cannot list them all, there are some stand out, especially if you're new to the state. The most famous is, of course, the blue bonnet, the state flower of Texas. It's that bluish-purple flower now creating waves of color along Texas highways, roadsides, and front yards. Indian paintbrushes are the bright orange blooms that are starting to pop up in North Texas. Evening primrose looks like a large lavender buttercup. Prairie verbena are gentle clusters of small pink or purple flowers that sit atop of stems. And the tall yellow flower with 5 small petals is the Texas yellow star. Finally, there's also the sunflowers. Texas has 19 varieties of wild sunflowers, including the Maximilian and the swamp sunflower. And the Texas Department of Transportation hosting open houses to talk about the future of Interstate 345. No sign marks the 1.4-mile elevated highway, but it connects 75 with Interstate 45 east of downtown Dallas. TxDOT says the existing highway is aging and needs to be replaced. It carries 180,000 cars and trucks every day. And some groups in Dallas want the highway removed. Coalition for a New Dallas says replacing the highway with city streets would open 245 acres, largely defined by empty parking lots right now. And removing the highway would open that land for mixed-use development and provide an easier path for people to walk between downtown Dallas and Deep Ellum. A Houston woman will spend 15 months in prison for trying to sell a spider monkey and more on Craigslist. This wasn't 21-year-old Savannah Nicole Valdez's first rodeo. She was previously sentenced to 2 years of supervised release for smuggling a monkey from Mexico and then fleeing an immigration checkpoint in Brownsville in the year 2022. And in this latest case, authorities last year found several ads posted on the website offering exotic birds for sale, including keel-billed toucans and yellow-headed Amazon parrots. In Fort Worth, MedStar has been dipping into its reserves to make ends meet, so the city hired a consulting firm to evaluate its services and reconsider its budget. France's competition watchdog said it fined Alphabet's Google $271.73 million for breaches linked to European Union intellectual property rules in its relationship with media publishers. The watchdog said Google's AI-powered chatbot Bard, since rebranded under the name Gemini, was trained on content from publishers and news agencies without notifying them. Britain has said it would refer the UAE-led takeover of The Telegraph for a lengthy review, a move that will effectively kill the deal because a law banning foreign governments owning newspapers is due to come into force in the coming months. Abu Dhabi-backed Redbird IMI took control of the Telegraph titles and the Spectator magazine in December when it helped repay the Barclay family's £1.2 billion debt to Lloyds Bank, but the deal needs regulatory approval. Also, the UK's privacy watchdog is currently looking into reports alleging that staff at a hospital tried to access Kate Middleton's private medical records while she was undergoing abdominal surgery in London. The incident took place at the London clinic where the Princess of Wales received treatment in January. The hospital has started its own investigation following claims that at least one staff member attempted to view Princess Kate's medical notes. Apple CEO Tim Cook hailed China's importance in the firm's supply chain as he met suppliers including BYD Electronics today on a visit that comes amid a drop in China sales for the iPhone maker. He is in Shanghai, and in a post on his social media account, he said he spent the morning walking along Shanghai's historic Bund River with Chinese actor Zheng Kai and that he had eaten a local breakfast. He did not disclose, however, what other plans he had for this China visit starting today. Samsung Electronics expects $100 million or more of revenue from its next batch of advanced chip packaging products this year. Set up advanced chip packaging as a business unit last year and expecting the results of Samsung's investments to come out in earnest from the second half of this year. The visionary behind the first karaoke prototype has died at the age of 100. Shigechi Negishi, a Tokyo-based entrepreneur, died from natural causes. And his 1967 invention, the Sparko box machine, is widely recognized as a key catalyst for Japan's karaoke craze. Singapore's Indian origin former Transport Minister S. Ishwaran, who's facing corruption charges, has surrendered his passport to the authorities on his return from Australia. He surrendered his passport on his return to Singapore following his discharge from a hospital in Melbourne. The 61-year-old, who was granted 800,000 bail after Singaporean dollars after bail, he was was originally slated to be in Australia but had permission to extend his stay. Equity benchmark indices today registered marginal gains. Sensex has climbed while the Nifty has settled. 5 times the size of Paris, visible from space, the world's biggest energy plant, enough electricity to power Switzerland. The scale of the project, transforming swaths of barren salt desert on the edge of western India into one of the most important sources of clean energy anywhere on the planet, is so overwhelming that the man in charge can't keep up. I don't even do the math anymore, said Sagar Adani in an interview. He is the executive director of Adani Green Energy Limited, the nephew of Gautam Adani, Asia's second richest man, whose $100 billion fortune stems from the Adani Group, India's biggest coal importer and a leading miner of the dirty fuel. The conglomerate has businesses in fields ranging from ports and thermal power plants to media and cements. The ad group is expected to invest more than 70% of its total investments towards green energy, including renewable power, green hydrogen, and green evacuation transmission line. The conglomerate is building the world's largest renewable park at Khavda in Gujarat, spanning over 530 square kilometer area. India's largest gigafactory for batteries will start operating in October and plans to almost triple its capacity by the year 2026. Oberoi Group, known for its luxury hotel brands Oberoi and Trident, is quietly developing new hotels close to nature. Some of these will be in beautiful locations with a strong sense of place, according to Vikram Oberoi, the managing director and CEO of the Oberoi Group. The project to develop the hotels close to nature is known internally and temporarily as Oberoi Nature. Not only topping different levels of chartered accountancy exams, female aspirants now comprise a record 48% of the qualifiers or pass-outs. In the overall pool, women CAs now have a 30% share, making a massive jump from just 8% in the year 2000. Long weekend has been cancelled for the Income Tax Department. The approaching end of the financial year 23-24 brings with it deadlines and obligations for taxpayers across the country, with March 29th falling on Good Friday and March 30th being a Saturday, followed by March 31st on a Sunday. It initially appeared to be a long weekend for many. However, in a move aimed at facilitating taxpayers and the Income Tax Department, they've opted to cancel this extended break for its employees. The International Monetary Fund has reached a staff-level agreement with Pakistan on the final review of a $3 billion bailout, where the country will receive a $1.1 billion after approval from the fund's executive board. PTI has fully endorsed Amnesty International's demand for the immediate restoration of social media platform X, stating that Pakistan has become a laughingstock in the international community due to the unjustified blockage of social media and the chain of oppression against its own citizens. The Violent Extremism Prevention Unit of the Capitol Police in Islamabad blocked 462 social media accounts involved in spreading hatred. And the bullish momentum continued at the Pakistan Stock Exchange today as shares gained over 200 points after Pakistan and the IMF reached that staff-level agreement. The current account posted a surplus last month, contrary to the preceding month, raising hopes that the government would achieve the current deficit target for fiscal year 2024, according to data released by the State Bank of Pakistan in Karachi. Exports of non-textile value-added products registered a year-on-year growth in the first 8 months of the current fiscal year. In this news out of Islamabad. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you. I do have the third segment coming up for you, in which we'll thank our sponsors and supporters, and we'll also talk about the first day of spring today. Navroz Mubarak. As we welcome the first official day of spring today, we have a little bit of chance of rains here in our 7-day forecast. Today says started off with temperatures in the 50s with some passing clouds. There is nothing showing up on the radar. We don't expect anything until late this evening and into tomorrow morning. Afternoon highs today will top out in the low 70s. So that's what the weather looks like for today. And today, of course, is the spring equinox, welcoming the spring season. Today is the first day of spring, and Nowruz is being celebrated, the 13-day festival in full swing, and millions worldwide preparing to take part in the festivities and celebrations rooted in the ancient Persian Empire. I know a lot of people from Iran as well as many from India, particularly the Parsis, celebrate Nowruz. We have the best of wishes going out to them, stretching from Afghanistan to Egypt and the Balkans. Persia's culture influence embraced through this very vibrant celebration dating back 3,500 years. Nowruz's traditions continue to hold significance, stressing the importance of an annual reset, cherishing family bonds and reconnecting with nature. Originally a holiday in Zoroastrianism, this ancient monotheistic religion founded by Zoroaster around 500 BCE, Nowruz plays a vital role during the Persian Empire's reign, and rulers summoned subjects out there, and the festival even made its way into many Western cultures. New Day, Nowruz in Persian, starts at the moment of the spring equinox. It actually started at 10:06 p.m. last night when the sun passes over the equator on its way north. And this year it kicks off right now. Unique customs marking this occasion globally. And on the final day of Nowruz, picnicking in the countryside and discarding sprouts into moving water mark a fresh start amidst the changing season. So happy Nowruz, Nowruz Mubarak to all of you as we welcome the spring season today that started so many years ago. We have some other stories from the annals of history that are happening, that had happened and many, many years ago. And we're starting with Black Death, which was created allegedly on today's date in the year 1345. According to scholars at the University of Paris, the Black Death was created from what they called a triple conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the 40th degree of Aquarius that occurred on that day. The Black Death, also known as the plague, that swept across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia during the 14th century, leaving an estimated 25 million people dead in its wake. And despite what these 14th century scholars claim, the most common ailment known as the Black Death is caused by a bacterium. The plague was carried by fleas that usually traveled on rats but jumped off to other mammals when the rat died. And it most likely first appeared in humans in Mongolia around the year 1320. But it was Black Death that was created on today's date in 1345. Popped up periodically until the 1700s, but never again reached epidemic proportions after the 14th century. Benjamin Franklin, Silas Deane, and Arthur Lee present themselves to France's King Louis XVI as official representatives of the United States on the 20th of March in 1778. Louis XVI was skeptical of the fledgling republic, but his dislike of the British eventually overcame these concerns, and France officially recognized the United States in February of 1778. And King Louis XVI received these U.S. representatives on today's date in the year 1778. Harriet Beecher Stowe's anti-slavery novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin is published on today's date in 1852. The novel sold 300,000 copies within 3 months and was so widely read that when President Lincoln met Stowe in 1862, he reportedly said, "So this is the little lady who made this big war." She was born as the 7th child of a minister and studied at private schools in Connecticut. And while living there, she encouraged fugitive enslaved people and the Underground Railroad. Later wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin in reaction to recently tightened fugitive slave laws. And the book had a major influence in the way the American public viewed slavery. The book established her reputation as a woman of letters, traveled to England where she was welcomed as a literary hero, along with Ralph Waldo Emerson Emerson, she became one of the original contributors to The Atlantic, which launched in November of 1857. And when Lincoln announced the end of slavery, she danced in the streets, continued to write throughout her life, and died in 1896. But it was Uncle Tom's Cabin that was published on the 20th of March, today's date, in 1852. General Beauregard opened a fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Harbor on today's date in 1854. The Civil War firmly identified that Republican Party as the party of the victorious North, and after the war, the Republican-dominated Congress forced a radical Reconstruction policy in the South, which saw the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution and the granting of equal rights to all Southern citizens. By 1876, the Republican Party had lost control of the South, but it continued to dominate the presidency until the election of Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. But it was the Republican Party that was founded on today's date, the 20th of March in 1854. On the 20th of March in 1861, President Abraham Lincoln's sons, Willie and Tad, are diagnosed with the measles, adding to the president's many troubles. Few U.S. presidents worked as hard in office as Abraham Lincoln did during the Civil War, and besides managing his generals in the war effort, he had to deal with prospective office seekers, foreign affairs, and the basic functions of the government. His third and fourth sons, born in 1850 and 53, offered Lincoln a welcome respite from the rigors of the executive office. The playful boys caroused in the White House, invaded cabinet meetings, and accompanied their father when he inspected troops in the camps around Washington, D.C., enjoyed playing with the soldiers that guarded the White House, members of the Pennsylvania Bucktail Regiment, who entertained them with stories and races. The boys set up a fort on the roof of the executive mansion and armed it with small logs painted to look like cannons. Often played with pets given to them by friends, including a pony and 2 goats that roamed the White House lawns. They recovered from the measles. However, in 1862, Willie contracted typhoid fever. He lay sick for weeks before dying on the 20th of February, and his death crushed Lincoln, who cried to his secretary, "My boy is gone. He's actually gone." Lincoln and his wife Mary grieved for months, and the president never fully recovered from that loss. Dad Lincoln died from illness at the age of 18 in 1871. The Lincoln's second son, Eddie, died shortly before his 4th birthday, and only the Lincoln's first child, Robert, lived to an advanced age. He passed away at the age of 82 in 1926. But it was on today's date, the 20th of March in 1861, that his 2 sons, Willie and Tad, were diagnosed with the measles. On the 20th of March in 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson notified Alabama's Governor George Wallace that he will use federal authority to call up the Alabama National Guard in order to supervise a planned civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery. Intimidation and discrimination had earlier prevented Selma's black population, over half the city, from registering and voting. And on Sunday, the 7th of March in 1965, a group of 600 demonstrators marched on the capital city of Montgomery to protest this disenfranchisement and the earlier killing of a black man by a state trooper. And so it was President Johnson who sent federal troops to Alabama to protect the Civil Rights March on today's date in the year 1965. And it was in August of that year that the Voting Rights Act was passed. Several packages of the deadly sarin gas are set off in a Tokyo subway system, killing 12 people and injuring over 5,000 on the 20th of March in 1995. Sarin gas was invented by the Nazis and is one of the most lethal nerve gases known to man. Tokyo police quickly learned who had planted the chemical weapons and began tracking the terrorists down. Thousands of checkpoints were set up across the nation in this massive dragnet. The gas attack was instituted by a cult, and the Supreme Truth had thousands of, it was called the Supreme Truth, Om Shinrikyo, and it had thousands of followers all over Japan who believed in their doomsday prophecies. And because it claimed the personal assets of new cult members, the Supreme Truth had well over $1 billion stashed away. A 40-year-old blind man was the leader of the cult, had long hair and a long beard, and wore bright robes, and often meditated while sitting on satin pillows. His books included claims that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ and that he had the ability to travel through time. Japanese authorities raided their compounds across the country but could not find him. At one camp at the base of Mount Fuji, police found tons of chemicals used to produce the sarin gas and found plans to buy nuclear weapons from the Russians. The police eventually located one of the cult's other top leaders, but when he was being taken into custody, he was stabbed to death by an assassin. Shortly after, the police found a hidden basement at Mount Fuji compound where other cult leaders were holed up, including a chemist who admitted making the sarin gas. Still, the leader, Asahara, remained at large, and the cult made 4 more gas attacks on the subways, injuring hundreds more. Another potential deadly chemical bomb was defused in a subway restroom, and the nation's top police officer was shot by a masked terrorist, adding to the country's unrest. And finally, in May the 16th, Asahara was found in yet another secret room of Mount Fuji compound and arrested, along with scores of other leaders. He was charged with murder. Their doomsday predictions had finally come true on a much smaller and more personal scale than they had envisioned. It was the Tokyo subway attacks with sarin gas that happened on today's date, the 20th of March in 1995. Ladies and gentlemen, I have huge thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Ahluwalia Law Offices, and to the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, as well as Digital X-Force for their support of community radio networks. Also, thanks going out to Kinza Law, My Kolachi, Ruchi Palace, Shri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flashbrush Productions. We have a holy celebration that is coming up, and this is tomorrow, the Mavs versus Jazz at 7:30. You do need to arrive early for the festivities and giveaways. DJ Paras and Dhol Tasha will be there, and the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce is very excited to invite you to join our hometown team, the Dallas Mavs, for their holy celebration night tomorrow at 7:30 for the pre-game entertainment and giveaways. So please get your tickets and more information at mavs.com/holy. Mystic Mandala having their huge Festival of Colors, the 14th annual Festival of Colors, the Holy Mela, coming up this Saturday in McKinney. Please go on to dallasfestivalofcolors.com for more information on the live performances, the dhol, the dance troops, the food trucks, the kirtan, yoga, drum circle, all happening there with Mystic Mandala. Also, we have the 2024 Holy Festival celebration hosted by Saba Dallas. That's the South Asian Bar Association, as well as DABA, the Dallas Asian American Bar Association, and that's happening on Sunday. This Sunday from 2 to 4 at the Breckenridge Park Gazebo at 5300 Renner Road, parking lot B off of Brand Road for convenient parking, the same venue as last year. And the Texas Women's Society is presenting the McKinney Asian Festival with cultural food, live performances, fun activities, a lantern walk, and plenty more at the Dr. Glenn Mitchell Memorial Park in McKinney from 11 to 6 this Saturday. Also, we would like for you all to know about the Autism Spectrum Frontiers, brought to you by Thrive Kids Foundation, advancing knowledge in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. This is going to be at the Collin College Conference Center at 9700 Wade Boulevard in Frisco, and it is on Saturday, the 6th of April. A healthcare professional conference from 8 to 1, and then a panel discussion for the community from 2 to 4. That's happening on Saturday, the 6th of April. The Success Door Pledge Campaign Foundation presenting Fly, First Love Yourself Season 4 on the 6th of April from 4 to 8 at the Dew Event Center in Louisville. And TIPS, the Texas Indo-American Physician Society, presenting their 5K, 10K run or walk, whatever you prefer, on Sunday, the 7th of April at the Oak Point Preserve and Spring Creek Parkway. Online registration is required at runsignup.com. Beginning this year, Northeast Chapter will be inaugurating a mentorship program to help students of Indian and South Asian origin for medical students in the North Texas region and graduates of Indian Medical School who are looking for residency positions, fellowships, clinical and research observerships, and jobs. And so for more opportunities and information, you can send an email to mentorship at tipsnec.org. Remember to mark the 8th of April for the solar eclipse, and we'll have details of that coming up for you. The U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce are having their business plan competition on the 12th of this month, and you can get more information at usicoc.org. U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce. Vibha, A Bright Future for Children, having their 18th annual kite flying festival, and that's happening on the 13th of April from 3 to 8 at the Sound at Cypress Waters on Olympus Boulevard in Coppell. Talent for a reason, calling anyone who wants to dance, sing, do stand-up comedy, show a unique skill, or do martial arts. Any talent is welcome. 3 to 8 at the Sound Amphitheatre in Coppell. This is Vibha's annual fundraising for the cause, and you can come and perform. Soar high, dream higher with Vibha. The Hyderabad Society of North Texas is presenting their Eid picnic on Saturday, the 20th of April, from noon till 6 at the Travick Pavilion. And for more information, you can call Muhammad Hamid at 469-544-4118. Pratham's annual gala is on Saturday, the 20th of April, with special guests Vidya Vox, the YouTuber and singer, and Krish Dhanam will be the author and speaker, will be our chief guest also. Thrilled to invite you to the 2024 Pratham Dallas Fort Worth Gala, an extraordinary evening dedicated to empowering children and young people in India to transform their lives and communities. Happening at the Omni Frisco Hotel on Saturday the 20th, and this year's gala theme, Changing Lives, Transforming Communities, will highlight the remarkable impact of Pratham's work in expanding access to quality learning opportunities. 20th of April. And on the 26th and 27th of April, there will be 3 shows of Umrao Jan Ada, a Western musical play in the Broadway style based on the novel written by Mirza Hadi Rusma. This is being brought to you by 360 Shows, Diamond Productions, and 24/7 Entertainment, and your tickets are available at Ticketmaster. We also do have 360 Shows and Diamond Productions bringing you Badshah's Pagal Tour on the 14th of June at the Curtis Culwell Center, and Shreya Ghoshal will be live in concert on the 16th of June, which is a Sunday. And as we get close to these dates, we will get you more details. But that looks like your social calendar on this first day of spring. Wishing you all a lovely new season, and Nowroz Mubarak one more time to those of you celebrating this beautiful day on this spring equinox.